Here we have two examples of the US command receivers. These were used by the US Navy, the Air Force and the Army. There were two basic variations, shall we call them. The ARC-5s, which both of these are, these were used by the Navy and the Air Force, whereas there's another series prefixed by a BC which was used by the Army. The numbers used by the Army did not relate to the ARC-5 numbers. The lowest frequency one was the BC 453, which was 190 to 550 kilohertz. There was never a version here of this type, the ARC-5, that very low frequency one. The lowest frequency one which was used by the Navy and the Air Force was actually the R26, which is this one, and this ran from 3 to 6 megahertz, whereas the next one up here is the 27, and that one ran from 6 to 9.1 megahertz. There was in fact an R28, which is the next one up from it, because it's completely different. It's a VHF set and it has 4 crystal control frequencies, and if you're interested in that, you'll find there's a video of one actually working amongst our collection of videos on this channel. The ARC-5s, the Navy and the aircraft versions, differ slightly from the BC versions because there's a couple of valve changes and some small changes to the circuitry around the AVC. These sets, if we're talking about the aircraft, they're typically used in the B-17 and the B-29 bombers. There's just one waveband, and they have a CW oscillator, which is useful obviously today if we wanted to use one for amateur radio listening, because we can use that as a BFO. So there's one of those incorporated. The actual circuitry itself, there are actually 6 valves inside it in a superhet configuration. You'll notice on the front of both of these there is a little adapter drawer that in fact unscrews and comes out, and there's a plug and socket arrangement in here as well, you can see, and this was used for different interface configurations. Coming out of here are the connections for the muting the CW oscillator. There's a volume control connection, there's also some power outputs as well, and likewise the actual audio output comes out through there. So for different arrangements you can put different ones of these in. That's normally obviously screwed in. All these units were designed to run on 28 volts DC, and a dynamotor usually sat at the back here on these sprung pads and connected to the set through these. We're not actually connecting these up when we demonstrate them in a minute through the dynamotor. We're just going to use an H10LT plugged in the back here. Anybody not familiar with the dynamotor, I have another dynamotor which we'll put on now just for interest, in case anybody's not familiar with it. And you can see the noise they used to make, but the dynamotor was used to generate the high voltage need for the HT of the valves. Here we see a typical dynamotor. A dynamotor is what it says it is basically. We have a dynamo on one side and a motor on the other, connected by a common shaft. So if we turn the motor one in, there's a fan here as well to keep it cool. The generator at the other end generates a DC voltage which comes out of these connections here. So volts in there, volts out there. Obviously it doesn't create a great deal of current out that end, but it was more than enough to drive the ARC-5 electronics on the HT. So if I turn it on now, it makes a lot of noise. You can see at the moment we are just hooked across the output and there's no volts on it at all. It's supposed to give out about 250 odd, so it's offloaded to run to above 300. It makes a lot of noise, so you'd have to excuse it, but watch the digits and we should see it working. There you go, it's 308 volts. Here are a couple of period images of the ARC-5 used in the B-17 and B-29. First of all, here's a radio rack used in a B-17. Note that at the top of the rack you have the transmitters and the receivers on the rack below. Also note that the remote control cables come from the tuning part, and you'll see they are marked here. So the knobs which we have on the front of these were put on afterwards because obviously we don't need the remote control tuning. This one here is actually showing the ARC5 transmitter and receiver, or receivers should I say, in a B29 in a museum. It's interesting to see there's no cables connected to the front at all. That's the clue that shows it's not really in use. And recently I just noticed, looking through the film Memphis Belle, it's nice to see that the B17 they use in that, you can actually see the radio rack, and this is what you can see, a quick glimpse of it here, which was a screenshot taken during that. Let's have a quick glance inside just to see what's in underneath the top cover. Underneath the top cover there is actually remote control. This is a storage place where this is the duplicate of the front dial, which goes on the end of the remote control. Inside you can see the 3 coils, and there are 6 valves as well. There's an RF amp, oscillator mixer, 2 IF amps, a detector and CW oscillator, and an audio amp, and they are the 6 metal valves round in there. Might be of interest to look at a cannibalized unit. I didn't cannibalize this, somebody built it into something else many moons ago I believe, because the front panel's all changed. You can see there's extra bits and pieces here, but at least it gives you some idea of what the thing looks like inside. There's the 3 gangs of the tuning capacitor. Normally this is covered up, and you can see the mica bases for the plug-in coils and the valves. Somebody's nicked the valve holders out of here, but this is interesting because this actually shows the little knurled nut bit, which you have to turn in order to, you can see the tuning capacitor changing. So that's what you need to do. If you have one of the unmodified versions, you'll have to put a knob on it. You have to put an adapter. The adapters are available in the States for some reasonable amount of money, but by the time it's been shipped across, if you're anywhere else in the world, it's probably a bit expensive. So what I did was I used some plastic piping on here, and then connected an ordinary piece of spindle cut off a pot, joined the two together and put a knob on it, and that's how I've done it with one of the ones over there.
Temperature 15, dew point 8, QNH 1012, low sig. Paris Orly, Metroport, Paris Orly. Nice to hear us, nice to hear us. We'll see you next time on All the Messages. Bye. In posizione verticale sulle ginocchia ed è uno degli strumenti cinesi più usati. 在这样特别夸的testing 跟你痛批他们是厚颜无耻。那么有些时候 La partie indique que l'objet n'est pas haut mais gars. Je comprends.
I thought as a conclusion, we'd look underneath the R27 variant here, and you can see the typically neat US construction. Everything is very, very tidily laid out, so that's very neat indeed. A point of note, if you have one of these and you're considering restoring it, if it needs restoring that is, these multiple capacitor cans, they do have a tendency to fail, so unless you can check they're okay, it might be worth changing these to start off with. Another point of note is the 2.83 megahertz IF on this would account for the lack of selectivity. You probably noticed when I was tuning it earlier on, but that comes with the set itself. Another little point is a little aerial trimmer we can see right up the end here, which is operated in the front panel, and the neon discharge tube which is put across the aerial as well. Well, I hope you find this informative. If you're interested in seeing the R28, that's the VHF version with the 4 switched crystal control frequencies, then there's one of those on one of our other videos if you want to look that up and see that working as well. Thanks for watching.